In a previous life, I worked for a company that some of you might remember if you're locals, USF&G. Anybody? Insurance company, long gone. I guess when I left, that was the end of it, but I don't know. I don't think so. It was an insurance company, but I worked in the data processing area. I was a systems programmer. And our job was to keep, the computers running in a certain sense, the software aspect of it. And that was our job, and the system ran 6 days a week, 24 hours a day. I just thought of something. That's going to be really helpful in about 3 minutes. And no matter what was going on, if something broke, you had to fix it. And if it broke at 3 o'clock in the morning, they would call you and you'd have to fix it. If it didn't matter, right? It's a very fixed schedule. Everything had to run on time, right? 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. One of my colleagues was an Orthodox Jew. And when he was hired by the company, we had kind of similar jobs, but he made it very clear that from sunset on Friday to sunset on Saturday, I am not available. And he kept to that, and the company was okay, we'll get our pound of flesh the other 6 days, right? And no matter what was going on, if it got to be, the sun's going down on Friday, it didn't matter what happens, was going on, he was gone. I'll see you tomorrow, if this is still going on. I have a lot of respect for him. Lee was his name. Interesting name. A lot of respect for him. He took his faith very real. That faith was inspired by the words that we just heard in the first reading. So forget about all that sewing business. We'll do that some other time, right? But in the first reading from Exodus, where we're offered the 10 Commandments, and there are 10 of them, actually. Sometimes it's hard to tell when you're hearing confessions. We'll talk about that in a second or two, right? 10 Commandments, and one of those is, got to find it. Remember to keep holy the Sabbath day. 6 days you may labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord, your God. And it goes on. Why? Because on the seventh day, right, the Lord himself rested. And what did God do on that day? God looked at everything that God had created and said, that's good. And spent the whole day doing that, right? Keep holy the Sabbath. Notice it doesn't say keep holy the Sabbath unless the Walmart's open, right? Don't keep holy the Sabbath unless your kid's got a baseball game, right? Keep holy the Sabbath unless you got something better to do. Keep holy the Sabbath. Now, we probably don't need to take it to the legal extremes of my good Orthodox Jewish friend, where it was by the clock, he would look on the newspaper, what time does sun set today? I'm out of here by then, right? We don't need to be legalistic about this, right? But but in fact, Catholics are. We are legalistic about it, but we've gone the other extreme, right? We've reduced a great commandment down to fulfilling your Sunday obligation, right? See if you can find the shortest mass you can find on Sunday morning. Make sure you're there before the gospel, and make sure you stay until after communion, and then you're good. You have fulfilled the third commandment. Congratulations. I don't think that's what God had in mind. I don't think that that's what God had in mind. And the fact is, in another life, I worked for Woolworths. There's the throwback, right? And Security Mall. Remember Security Mall? God knows what that is now. Anyway, and I worked in the food service part during college. I supported myself that way. And everything in that mall was closed on Sunday except for the food place and the movies. Oh, and the nut stand in the middle. And the pharmacy, I think. Everything else was closed. Right? It wasn't that long ago. It was in my lifetime. We've really lost something. Now again, we don't want to be legalistic about it, but it is a commandment of the Lord. Going back to the Jewish tradition, in the Hasidic tradition, which is incredibly, we have this kind of stereotypical image of Hasidic Judaism, right? We think of the guys with the furry hats in New York dancing in the street or stuff. It's a stereotype. There's a beautiful spiritual tradition behind that. And one of the aspects of that is how they keep the Sabbath. Right? Within that tradition, going back into the 15th and 16th centuries in our calendar, right? They developed these beautiful rituals, right? As the sun was setting on Friday night, everybody would put on their beautiful clothes in the town, and they'd all go out walking towards the setting sun. And as the sun was setting, they would greet the Queen of the Sabbath, as they would say. God's presence, God coming to them to rest with them. Right? It's not God watching them to make sure they don't do any work. God resting with them. And them welcoming God. And they'd have their candles, and they'd process back to their homes. And there'd be a special place set aside where the Queen of the Sabbath would rest for that period. They'd come together as family. They'd share a meal together. There's an idea that, it's gone, right? Went out with the buggy whip. Right? Families actually sitting down and having a meal together without the TV on, without everybody with their phones in their faces. Right? Time together, festivity, joy. So much so within that tradition, that was the perfect night for the husband and the wife to make love. Because that is an ultimate expression in our world of God's presence among us, of God's goodness, of God's creativity. Right? What a beautiful thing. Right? Now again, we're not going to be legalistic about this. Right? We also don't want to fall into the trap of thinking if I get my card punched at Mass, if I can score a bulletin from my parish on Sunday morning, I am good. Right? That's not the point. If we've reduced it to that, we've lost something profound. Right? Because this is a command of God. Notice in these texts, right? It's pretty long, right? I bet 85% of the text is on those first 4 commandments, right? 4, right? And then when you get into the ones that everybody confesses, right, they're one sentence. Don't steal, don't commit adultery, right? Those are one sentence. It's the other ones about God that get all the play, and we ignore these routinely, right? People come to confession, right? You get I said I used God's name in vain, which is not really what that text is about, but okay, right? But nobody confesses I did keep the Sabbath, right? Nobody confesses that while they're looking at their cell phone 24 hours a day that I worship idols, right? Well, we all know that 6th one, right? Everybody, you think that's the only one left anymore. Right? We need balance. And isn't that the point? We need balance in our lives, right? Just as God rested on the 6th day and looked at us and said, boy, that's really good, shouldn't we take some time and that we can do the same? Look at God and say, God, you're really good. This has been a rotten 18 months, but you're still good. We're still here. We're with family, we're with friends, our spouse. We have family, we have friends, we have love. We have a nice meal together. What else do you want? We got a roof over our heads. And I'm still breathing on the other side of the dirt. God is good. It's a worthy thing every once in a while to stop and do what the Lord did, right? Even those computers at USF&G observe the Sabbath, right? Now, I'm lying a little bit. That was the day they did maintenance on the machines. But pretend for a minute, right? But they did no productive work on Sunday, right? We can learn from them. Obey the machines, as it were, right? The question is, how do we do that? Well, that's why God gave you a brain and a heart. In your world, in your situation, in your state of life, how do you make this real? And not just reduce it to a line in the Code of Canon Law that says you're obliged to attend Mass on Sunday, whatever that means. We ask the Lord for wisdom to help us to understand and to embrace the fullness of God's goodness and the fullness of the commandments, and to help us to live that happy, holy time of the Sabbath, whatever that might mean, and to just accept the graces the Lord has to offer us when we just stop for a minute